Evan Thornley was once a rising star in Victorian politics. He was a former parliamentary secretary to Victorian Premiers Steve Bracks and John Brumby. And he gave up his promising career to continue his entrepreneurial pursuits. Now, Thornley's achievements read like a who's who of success. He was a founding chair of Per Capita, a board member of the Brotherhood of St Laurence and the Chifley Research Centre, a founding director of Get Up, and along with his wife, founded LookSmart and Good Start. Now, Thornley also founded property management company LongView. However, with the federal government now 1 month into its term, we thought there's no one better than Evan Thornley to discuss what are the challenges that lie ahead for Anthony Albanese and whether he thinks the federal government will rise to the occasion to overcome them. Welcome, Evan.
Thanks very much, Michael. I will just correct one thing for the record. It's very important that I do.
Yep.
I'm enormously proud of the association I have with Good Start, but the person that I kicked that around with originally and who deserves the vast bulk of the credit for its success is Michael Trail. Michael really did an extraordinary job in taking that original idea and turning it into reality. So I think he should rightly be credited with that one, but I'm happy to have played a role in dreaming the idea up and being part of it at the beginning.
Great. So we'll add to that list, humble and forthright as well, Evan.
Yeah, right.
So Anthony Albanese, 1 month in, how do you think he's travelling?
Yeah, look, I think the new government's been probably surprisingly sure-footed for a new government. I don't mean about them personally that was a surprise, but just any new government can take a while to find its feet. And this one's had to do so in clearly a very volatile environment, both domestically and internationally, and seems to have done so in a fairly sure-footed way. Certainly, I think the big surprise to a lot of the commentators is how sure-footed they've been in foreign affairs, with Albo and Penny, dealing with serious issues on the global stage in a very credible way, which is comforting, and Richard Marles, I think, in defence. And then the real challenge, as we know, is, Jim Chalmers has been locked in a room with Steve Kennedy in the Treasury for the last month trying to work out how on earth they deal with raging inflation, and the possibility of the lights going out on the electricity grid at any given moment if things get too cold. So they've got plenty to deal with, but so far they seem to be focused on the right issues. Yeah.
It's almost that poison chalice. It's like, finally, yes, we got it. Oh no, we've actually
be careful
got
what
it.
you wish for. Yeah.
How long do you think their period of grace will last for? Because obviously, any reasonable person would say, look at what they've inherited, they've picked up. But how long will they go, okay, we know what's happened now, we know why it happened, but how long before they start going, well, we need a solution, we need a plan, as Albo was always on the front foot saying that he had?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I think each thing works at a different cadence. As Governor Gray Davis in California found out, if you ever let the lights go out, it's curtains for you in government, period. So, something like the energy crisis, people will have zero tolerance for failure. Clearly, something like the inflation people get, it's going to take a while to deal with. They at least want to know you're on their side, and I think the minimum wage case was a critical part of that. But you've probably got a year or so to give them confidence that you are at least likely to get on top of it. And then, the other things that are really what the public policy people call the wicked problems, climate change and housing, no one's come up with feasible solutions to thus far. So I'm not sure that the voting public's patient about that. Clearly they aren't. That's part of the reason they changed governments. But I think people realise that it's real tricky to do effective things in climate change without destroying jobs and communities. Everyone, or most sensible people, want us to do that, but do both of those things. And housing is really challenging in a number of different ways. And so, you know, quite rightly and comfortingly, I think a federal election was fought on exactly the right issues. The big issues were, what do you do about raging inflation? What do you do about China and the foreign environment? And then what do you do about housing and climate change? So, you know, I always think the voters get it right. That's the issues that the voters wanted answers to, and they decided that they weren't comfortable if folks running the show had answers or were even necessarily fully focused on the problem. So they've elected a government that says that it is. They seem to be working on it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to solve any of those things. They certainly got off to a really good start with the China and the foreign affairs stuff, and I think that's been a comforting thing for everybody, including the right-wing commentator. You know, I think Greg Sheraton thinks that Albo and Penny and Richard Marles are doing a pretty good job on that stuff. So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, the diplomacy is actually diplomacy now, rather than the chest beating and the megaphone being used. That we need to sit quietly.
Well, you know, obviously all of that stuff was meant for a domestic audience and trying to be used as a wedge in domestic politics. I'm sure there were serious people behind the scenes in the former government that were desperately trying to do effective diplomacy. Maurice Payne, among others, but they were playing politics with it, and I reckon the voters saw through that, actually, as they usually do.
Now,
yeah.
Evan, how much? And I hate to give more credit than what is due. What could well be coincidence. How much of a preemptive strike do you think Morrison's? They're going to raise taxes. They're going to spend this. They're bad economic managers, knowing that the very solutions that needed to be applied for the problems that existed are those. There's no way out of it. We have to have some way of repaying that debt. We have to have a reduction without a reduction in services when we're in such critical times, and we need support and further services going along. We can't actually cut the government back, because now we're providing services for the marginalised and the disadvantaged. How much of that is going to play into whether it's an accurate or an inaccurate perception that, well, Labor are just bad economic managers, and it's just one of those times that the economy worldwide is struggling?
Yeah, I mean, you know, inflation's the real problem for everybody, right? And it's going to be. Everyone thought it was going to be a really temporary thing coming out of the COVID spending, and now the fear is that it'll become self-fulfilling and people get inflationary expectations. So I think that's a real tricky one. The politics of it. You know, it was really funny to see what a good, clear, clean, simple, powerful message Morrison had in the 2019 election around protecting the economy. They ran a really good campaign. They ran a very simple, clear message. They repeated it ad nauseum, and the voters trusted them on it. With what a mess they made of the same argument. Everyone always fights the last war, right? In 2022. And, you know, Labor had a brilliant response, which is, if you guys have done such a great job with the economy and it's so strong and everything's great, how come $1 an hour for the lowest paid workers is going to blow the whole thing to smithereens? Yeah. You know, if it's so strong. Like, it was a pretty powerful harpoon through that argument. So I think that the people that came out with damaged economic credibility was actually Morrison. Now, whether Labor can establish its economic credibility is principally going to be determined by how this cost of living crisis gets resolved and inflation. And, you know, I think Albo's definitely got a bit of an eye to 1983. And, you know, what would Martin Ferguson say? How the government, unions and the bosses can get together and try and solve this problem together. Whether Labor can pull off that sort of consensus-driven approach could you know, if they can pull that off as well as they did it in 1983, all power to them. I don't know if the world still works that way, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, given Albo's support for the 5.1% increase in the minimum wage, and now we're seeing huge industrial action happening in New South Wales with the teachers, the nurses, the transport, and they were offered 3%, and they're saying no, we need the 5.1. Is this going to be used as a weapon against Albo, saying, look what you've started now?
Sure, and you know, that's, as I say, why I think he's signalling that he's going to try and go back to that Accord style approach. I think the question there is, you know, the genius of the Hawke-Keating-Kelty solution was that they convinced workers to trade off wage for social wage, right? We won't give you as big a pay rise, but we'll give you superannuation for a comfortable retirement. We'll give you Medicare. We'll give your kids an education. We'll give you all these other things if you guys can moderate the wages. And the union movement got comfortable with that, in fact, led quite a bit of that. And the employers were comfortable with it, and it was a great solution, and it served the country incredibly well. I'm not sure what the trade-offs are now in social wage that you could ask workers to trade wage rises for. I mean, there is stuff that's obviously really important, like the NDIS. So I don't know that you can. I don't know how you repeat the 1983 kind of geometry with the current set of cards, and I'm guessing they're thinking real hard about that question right now.
Yeah, now, we were speaking before, I've noticed a lot of disquiet amongst Labor voters, or traditional Labor voters, where it seems they haven't gone left enough. They want everything at once. And I suppose after the last 9 years of not much coming their way for that ideological following, they want everything done at once. They want everything from refugees, they want the minimum wage, they want the social support payments going up, and they seem to be starting eating themselves. How do they regain that support or set realistic expectations?
I mean, every progressive government in history has had that challenge with its own base. And I'm trying to think of an example of where not satisfying those demands has caused any major genuine political problems for them with their own base. And I don't think there are a lot of them, to be honest. You know, there are usually moderating forces within progressive governments that say, sure, comrades, you'll get all of that, but not yet. And there's probably a healthy tension there, and that's how it plays out. I think every progressive government in history faces that challenge, and most of them are able to moderate it, and they'll lose a bunch of folks to the left, to the Greens, and that's it's ever been thus. So I think those are. I don't think that's a new or unusual or difficult challenge. I think that's business as usual for progressive politics for 100 years. I think some of the other things that they're facing are much more wicked problems than that. You know, and I mean, the version of that is obviously splitting people and has done for a generation now is not actually the debate about whether climate change is a problem, but the debate about how to find a solution or a set of solutions that's not going to penalise working people in their communities. That's hard.
Yeah, and the need for immediacy.
Yeah, and we do need urgent and powerful action, but we also need to not destroy the lives of working families and their communities, and that's a hard problem. And the folks who say it's easy, you just do whatever you have to do for climate change and bugger the consequences, they go to the Greens.
Yep. Oh, all right, Evan Thornley, all-round overachiever and great bloke. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael. Cheers.